May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. I don't think we really get what a surprise it was, what happened that first resurrection morning. Mary had gone to the tomb to do the last thing she thought she could do for Jesus, which was look after his body. And I suppose we've looked at Easter enough times that it's no longer a surprise. We know what's coming, don't we? Even on Maundy Thursday or on Good Friday, I think sometimes it's hard to think about the horror of that day because we know Sunday's coming. We know what's going to happen. But Mary didn't. And I imagine her trudging there. It was early in the morning. It was before the light had come up. And off she goes. But surprise after surprise comes. And at first it's not great. There's a short poem, it's sort of a poem by Gideon Hugh that says, in churches they give praise to the flowers they have planted, but God is a weed, found often among the neglected, rising coarse and unlooked for through the shattered slabs, playing havoc with our pretty borders. He talks about that God meets us in surprising ways. Now, I think I've told you the story before, how I was sent out into the garden when we lived in Horseheath, to tidy it up a bit. And there was this plant coming up between two slabs. And it turns out Ruth had been looking after this because she knew it was a poppy and it was about to come out. And unfortunately, I just pulled it up because it was a weed as far as I was concerned. I got into a lot of trouble for that. I'm not allowed to garden unsupervised because of it. But God does come at us in unusual ways. We find him in places and in people that we don't always expect. So Mary comes to the tomb and she finds that the stone has been rolled back. And she gets back a lot quicker than she came. Except she goes to find Simon Peter and the other disciple whom Jesus loved. That's John. He never mentions his own name. And she says, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb and we don't know where they've put him. Just when she thought things couldn't get any worse, they got worse. Just when she thought that, well, at least no one can harm him now, when he's in his tomb, someone has taken him. You ever feel like that when life goes wrong? Do you ever feel that things can't get any worse? And then they do. Ever one of those days where you just want to go back to bed, pull the covers over your eyes and begin again? Well, that's the kind of day that Mary was having. She thought he'd been taken away. She runs to the only people she could think of running to, John and Peter, and they run to the tomb. It appears John is a bit quicker than Peter. It says he outran him. Perhaps he was a bit younger. We get the impression perhaps he was, but he runs to the tomb. But being John, he stops at the entrance. Whereas Peter, I imagine him lumbering behind, but doesn't stop at the entrance because, well, it's Peter, isn't it? Peter's always going to put his foot in it. He's always going to do something without really thinking about it. He's always going to make promises that 2 days ago he wasn't able to keep, that he'd always follow Jesus. And in he goes. And they see the strips of linen and the cloth that had been around his head, And they don't understand what's going on, but they believe what Mary said. They believe that he'd been taken away. And their whole world just spirals down as if into a whirlpool. Because they don't even have what they thought they had. When we lived in Cambridgeshire, we lived not far from a road called the 1307. It was a charming road, but one of the main features of it were these great big red signs that said, "You are now," basically it's saying you're now in danger of dying. It didn't say that, but that's basically what they meant. It was big red signs that says, "This is a dangerous road. Be careful." It was in council speak, so it didn't actually say that, but that's what they meant. And every so often you would see a piece in the road where the grass was slightly better kept than the rest of the road. And there would be flowers, perhaps a small cross, perhaps something planted. But it actually got to the point where the council decided there were too many of these. Of course, each one marked where someone had died. And they decided that they wanted to sort of up the reputation of the place by taking away these wayside memorials. Well, I don't think they had any clue as to how people felt about that. Because many of those who died were young, cut off in the prime of life. And I remember being at a meeting at the village hall in Horseheath where a council employee, I think, began to regret that he was a council employee because he was the one sent to take the flag. Because people felt, no, that's the last connection we have. And that's how Mary felt. The last connection I had is gone. Well, John and Peter have come and gone, and Mary goes back to the last place she'd seen him. You know, it's striking to me that when Jesus was crucified, we only hear of John being at the cross and the woman. It's striking to me that on that first day of the week, it's the women who go to the tomb and Mary who returns. We don't hear a lot about the women. It was a society ruled by men, a society where men mattered and women didn't so much. But the women were always there. And as far as Mary was concerned, she had nothing left but this tomb. And when she comes back, she's crying, and as she weeps, she bends over to look in. She doesn't lumber in like Peter or follow like John. And she sees two angels in white seated where his body has been. And then the questions start. The why word. Now, the why word is charming sometimes when people ask why about it, particularly when small children ask it, unless it's your own child and they've been doing it since 5:30 or 6 in the morning. And you just want to, have a moment's peace. I remember with both sets of children, both Ruth's and mine, the why word it could drive you crazy, can't it? Well, they ask her, why is she crying? The angels. She tells them, they've taken my Lord away and I don't know where they put him. People are asking stupid questions. She's upset. She's outside a tomb where a body has disappeared. And they want to know why she's crying. It's almost like Mary didn't notice that they were angels. Do you notice that most of the time that angels come, they have to say, don't be afraid. They come to Mary when to announce that Jesus will be there. Don't be afraid. They come to Joseph. Don't be afraid. Here they don't have to say don't be afraid because she's not afraid. She doesn't really care who they are or what they are. They're just asking stupid questions because she wants to know where her Lord is. That's all that matters to her. That's all that matters. All her hopes or dreams are gone, and now, like those roadside memorials, they want to take the last thing from her because his body's gone, and now they're asking silly questions. And then someone else is behind her. She's in the entrance. She's talking to the angels. And he says, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you're looking for?" She thought he was the gardener. Perhaps her hopes just grew a little bit. Perhaps she said, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you put him and I'll get him." She didn't recognize him. Why doesn't she recognize Jesus? Because he was the last person that she expected to see. Because she was crying, because she was looking out through the entrance of the tomb into the light. She wasn't really listening. She didn't really care. Because her Lord was gone. And that's all that mattered. You know, sometimes we're a bit like that. Sometimes when life comes at us hard, when all that solid ground that we had around us just seems to fall away beneath us, and everything we hoped for and depended upon doesn't seem to be there anymore, we don't always see that God's there in the midst of it. And he doesn't blame us for that. I don't think he does, because sometimes life's so overwhelming, so awful, that we can't. We just can't see it. We just can't hear his voice. Until finally we see. Malcolm Geet is an Anglican priest who is also a poet. He works at Cambridge University. And he wrote this poem about this day and about this situation. He blesses every love which weeps and grieves, and now he blesses hers who stood and wept, and would not be consoled or leave her love's last touching place, but watched as low light crept up from the east. A sound behind her stirs, a scatter of bright birdsong through the air. She turns but cannot focus through her tears or recognize the gardener standing there. She hardly hears his gentle question, why are you weeping? Or sees the play of light that brightens as she chokes out her reply. They took my love away, my day is night. And then she hears her name. She hears love saying, the word that turns her night and ours today. She changed in that moment. She knew all was all right with the world. She didn't understand the how and the what and the where, but she knew all was right with the world because he called her by name. He said, Mary. Isn't it weird how when someone says your name, even in the middle of a crowded room, you hear it, you understand it, you think, what are they doing? Maybe you think they're talking about you. Maybe you think they're trying to get your attention. If it was me when I was young, my mum used to call me Duncan John Keys. And you knew that when it was Duncan John Keys that you were being called, that you were in trouble. Well, Mary isn't in trouble. She hears the word. and she knows the world is all right again. Do we hear our name? Do we hear that word when God calls? Do we hear when, in the light of his resurrection, he comes to us and offers us resurrection and offers us new life? Do we hear him? Do we listen? Today, on this day of resurrection, let us hear him call our name down through the centuries. Because you note, and we'll say it again at the end, where we said Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. He calls your name and he calls my name as he called Mary's name. In the middle of trouble, in the middle of tears, in the middle of despair, he calls out to us. And he tells us of his resurrection. That's why we celebrate this Easter. Oh, it's great that he rose from the dead. It's a wonderful end to the story. But you know what? It's not the end. It's just the beginning. The beginning of new life for you and for me. The beginning of knowing that he walks with us in troubled times. And one day he will introduce us to his Father. As the Father says, well done, you good and faithful servant. Let's pray.